The desert has a way of making you feel like the last person alive on Earth. In June of 2025, during one of the worst heat waves the region had ever recorded, I was assigned a maintenance shift at a remote wind farm buried deep in the high desert. The nearest town was over an hour away. The nearest technician was 40 minutes down a dirt road. And that night, I was completely alone. My job was simple: inspect one of the older turbines, run diagnostics, check the mechanical systems, and replace a few worn components inside the nacelle. Nothing about it sounded dangerous, until you're standing 300 feet above the desert floor, inside a small metal box, watching the entire world move beneath you. The wind turbine tower swayed constantly in the heat. Every gust pushed against the massive structure, making the steel walls groan and creak around me. Outside, the landscape stretched endlessly in every direction. No buildings, no lights, no voices. Just miles of empty desert and hundreds of spinning blades cutting through the night sky. I remember looking down through the small maintenance window and realizing how completely isolated I was. If something went wrong, nobody would hear me. Nobody would reach me quickly. I was alone in the middle of nowhere, trapped inside a machine built by humans, but surrounded by something far older. The shift started normally. I checked the control systems, inspected the gearbox, and ran temperature scans on the internal components. Then, around midnight, I heard it. A sound. At first, I thought it was just another mechanical issue. A faint, metallic scratching, almost like a loose panel vibrating in the wind. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It was slow, rhythmic, almost deliberate. I ignored it at first. Wind turbines make strange noises. The entire structure was moving, expanding and contracting from the extreme temperatures. But after 10 minutes, the sound was still there. Same pattern, same rhythm, coming from somewhere outside the nacelle. I grabbed my high-definition FLIR thermal tablet and turned it toward the exterior panels. I checked the control systems, inspected the gearbox, and ran temperature scans on the internal components. Then, around midnight, I heard it. A sound. At first, I thought it was just another mechanical issue. A faint, metallic scratching, almost like a loose panel vibrating in the wind. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It was slow, rhythmic, almost deliberate. I ignored it at first. Wind turbines make strange noises. The entire structure was moving, expanding and contracting from the extreme temperatures. But after 10 minutes, the sound was still there. Same pattern, same rhythm, coming from somewhere outside the nacelle. I grabbed my high-definition FLIR thermal tablet and turned it toward the exterior panels. I thought maybe I would find a hot bearing, a damaged wire, or some mechanical friction causing the noise. The thermal screen loaded. At first I saw nothing. Just the cold outline of the turbine housing against the dark desert. Then something appeared. A heat signature on the outside of the nacelle. I froze. The shape was impossible to understand. It looked like a person. a human shape pressed against the fiberglass casing. But that couldn't be right. There was no ladder, no access point, no way anyone could be outside at that height. I moved the thermal camera closer. The figure disappeared. Then the scratching stopped. For a few seconds, everything went silent. And then I heard something that made my blood run cold. The sound was no longer coming from outside. It was coming from inside the tower, below me. The hollow steel pillar beneath the nacelle. A climbing sound. Metal shaking. A slow, heavy movement moving upward through the empty tower. At first I thought it was another technician. Maybe someone had arrived without radio contact. But then I checked my communication system. Nothing. No vehicles, no calls, no signal. And then the sound changed. It started moving faster. Much faster. But it was. The figure was holding onto the blade like gravity meant nothing. Like the impossible height meant nothing. And then the scratching returned. Right beside me. The emergency service hatch. The only entrance into the nacelle. It was locked. I stared at it. The scratching became louder, harder, more aggressive. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Then it turned into pounding. Something was hitting the hatch. The reinforced glass shook with every impact. I stepped back and lifted the thermal tablet, and I saw them. 5 long fingers pressed against the other side of the glass. The heat from the hand burned brightly on the screen. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I was trapped inside a small metal room hundreds of feet above the ground, with nowhere to run and nowhere to go. The ladder down was behind whatever was outside. The hatch was the only exit, and something was trying to get in. The pounding continued. The entire nacelle shook. Then suddenly, silence. Complete silence. The kind of silence that feels wrong. I looked back at the thermal screen. The figure was gone. The hand was gone. Whatever had been outside had disappeared. The next morning, another maintenance crew arrived. They found me sitting inside the nacelle, still holding the thermal tablet. I didn't tell them everything at first. I just showed them the hatch. And then they found the marks. Deep cuts carved into the steel casing near the emergency access point. 3 inches deep. Perfectly spaced. Like claws had dragged across industrial-grade metal. The company called it unexplained structural damage. They blamed the wind, the heat, anything except what actually happened. But I know what I saw, because some places in the desert are older than us, older than our machines, older than our technology. Maybe there are things out there that were never meant to see humans building towers in their territory. Maybe the desert was never empty. Maybe it was just waiting.